everyone. I'm Sheldon, and this week on Friday Farsight, we'll be discussing the world's first space elevator. Now, this is a prediction that's near and dear to my heart, as you may remember from previous comments, because I'm working on a novel that has a space elevator in it. This was actually one of the first predictions I ran once I built the website, because I wanted to check my futurism, because I'd already written quite a bit of the novel. And it turned out the first prediction almost exactly agreed with me. It put it in the 2060s, and I had it in the 2070s. So I felt pretty good. To make this episode, I reran the prediction with a much newer model and with the new prompt engineering and whatnot, because I get much more lush articles with the current version of the website. So I got a better article. It pushes it further in the future, but luckily my novel is still within the window. But as a weekly reminder, remember that this is an AI-generated prediction and an AI-generated show, so we can't trust it completely. I'm just hoping it's somewhat reasonable. And I think with that, I think Biff and Betty can handle the details, so why don't we just hand it off to them? Take it away, guys.
Thanks, Sheldon. Hi, everyone. So, Betty, where are we headed this week?
2100 plus or minus 35 years. That is the official strategic farsight window for when humanity finishes building its first space elevator.
35 years either way. So we're talking 2065 on the early end, 2135 on the late. That's a wide window.
A wide window for the tallest structure ever built. Welcome, everyone, by the way, to Friday Farsight, where Biff and I unpack one prediction a week from the Strategic Farsight Encyclopedia. This week, a cable from the surface of the Earth to outer space.
Okay, so for anyone who hasn't read like every Arthur C. Clarke novel ever written, walk us through what a space elevator actually is.
Right. So picture a tether, a single continuous fiber, anchored to a floating platform somewhere in the equatorial Pacific Ocean. It runs straight up 36,000 kilometers to a counterweight in geostationary orbit, and freight, and eventually people, climb the cable on mechanical platforms, powered by electricity. No rockets, no fuel, just an elevator.
Hold on, geostationary orbit. Pretend I forgot what that is.
Sure. It's the orbit where a satellite circles the Earth at exactly the same rate the Earth turns. So from the ground, the satellite looks like it's just parked in the sky. Same spot, day and night. That's where TV broadcast satellites live, about 36,000 kilometers up.
Right, so that's why the cable has to go that high. The top has to stay parked above one point on Earth.
Exactly. Otherwise, the cable wraps around the planet, which is, bad.
Right. Different sci-fi writer, Kim Stanley Robinson. Exciting, but bad. Go on.
Okay, so 36,000 kilometers. That's, almost 3 Earths stacked on top of each other.
We're not really wrapping our heads around that, are we? I mean, the Burj Khalifa is, 800 meters? This thing is 10,000 times taller.
45,000 times, actually.
45? The category of tall thing basically breaks. It's not a building. It's a thread drawn from the planet to space.
A thread, like extruded, emerging from the biosphere meter by meter, constructed by specks of animated matter. Us, chemical machines for dissipating the sun's energy, somehow deciding to reach an arm straight out into space.
And the dream goes back to Tsiolkovsky, right?
1895, Konstantin Tsiolkovsky, a self-taught, partially deaf schoolteacher in a Russian village called Kaluga, lost most of his hearing to scarlet fever as a kid, so he taught himself science by basically reading every book he could find. He worked out the basics of orbital mechanics alone in this country town, decades before there were any rockets. And then he visited the Eiffel Tower, brand new in 1889, and he asked one question. What if you just kept building?
A deaf country schoolteacher invents the space elevator. I love that so much. That's a movie.
That is absolutely a movie.
I might actually steal that.
Permission granted. Then, the modern version, the one we'd actually try to build, was sketched by a Soviet engineer named Yuri Artsutanov in 1960 and this is great, in the Sunday supplement of Pravda.
The Sunday supplement of Pravda, like in between the crossword and the cabbage recipes.
Right, next to a Khrushchev speech, probably. and then refined by Bradley Edwards in a famous 2000 study funded by NASA's Institute for Advanced Concepts, which is basically NASA's long-shot research department. They fund the wild ideas. If it sounds insane and you can do the math, they'll give you a grant.
I want to work there.
Well, you already know what geostationary orbit is.
Check. So this is a 131-year-old dream.
Yeah.
And if we finally build it in 2100, it'll have been a human idea for 2.5 centuries before we made it real. Is there any other technology with that kind of waiting period?
Not really. Airplane? Single generation. Submarine? Maybe a century if you count Da Vinci. The closest analog is controlled fusion, which Eddington proposed in 1920 and we still haven't cracked. But even fusion is only a century old.
So why now? Or really, I guess, why later? What's actually stopping us?
One word: materials.
Like, we don't have strong enough string.
Pretty much. The tether has to support its own weight under enormous tension across all 36,000 kilometers. Engineers measured this thing called specific strength, basically strength divided by density. You want a material that's incredibly strong without being too heavy, because every kilogram of cable has to be held up by the cable above it.
Cable holding up cable all the way down.
All the way down, and the number you need is about 50 times stronger than the best high-strength steel.
50 times stronger than steel. What's even close to that?
One known material: carbon nanotubes. In theory, they could hit 2.5 times what we need, way more than enough.
In theory. Uh-oh, I sense a butt coming.
Big but. So a materials scientist named Nicola Pugno, working in Italy, showed back in 2006 that in the real world, quantum mechanical effects and tiny defects drop the actual strength by an order of magnitude. Think of it this way. A perfect carbon nanotube is like a perfect chain, every link identical, every atom in place. But every real chain has weak links. One atom out of place, anywhere along thousands of kilometers, becomes the failure point.
So the longer the cable, the more chances for a flaw. Like the more jokes I make, the more chance one of them sucks.
Precisely. You're the living proof, Biff. And it gets worse. We can only manufacture continuous CNT fibers in lengths of centimeters to a few meters.
And we need
100,000 kilometers. Continuous.
100,000 kilometers versus a few meters. What is that gap in numerical terms?
A factor of about 50 million.
I'm sorry, 50 million? That is not a scaling problem. That is a we need to invent a new universe problem.
It is the gap. There was a 2013 study by a researcher named Peng in Nature Nanotechnology that hit 9.6 gigapascal meters per kilogram. Impressive, still 10 times below what we need. And the leading institution actually trying to build a real space elevator, and there is one, is a Japanese construction company called Obayashi. They have publicly said the strength and production of carbon nanotubes is, quote, not yet sufficient. They are the optimists.
Obayashi, so this is an actual construction company, not a research outfit.
130-year-old Japanese construction giant. They built the Tokyo Skytree. They build airports, dams, skyscrapers, and they have a serious internal research program for the space elevator. Public milestones, target year, the works.
So an actual construction company with actual customers is saying, yeah, we'll squeeze the space elevator in right after the new bypass.
Right after the new bypass, yes. And their target is 2050.
2050? That's 24 years from now. Are they serious?
Material scientists outside the company describe the 2050 timeline as, and I quote, fantastically ambitious.
Translation, Obayashi is dreaming.
That is the translation, yes.
Okay, so the materials are nowhere close. What else is hard?
Everything else. Assume you solved the materials problem tomorrow. You still have to deploy the thing. And the deployment plan is wild. You don't build from the ground up.
You don't?
You build from the middle out.
Wait, what?
You start at geostationary orbit, you park a kind of seed satellite up there, and you simultaneously lower a tether toward Earth while extending another section out away from Earth, so the center of mass stays at geo the whole time. If you don't balance both directions, the thing either falls down or flies away.
I had no idea. I thought you started at the bottom and climbed up the way you build a skyscraper.
Nope, the opposite. And Peter Swan, who's the president of the International Space Elevator Consortium, describes this whole deployment as requiring, quote, technologies that don't yet exist.
I love that the guys who run the Space Elevator Club are openly admitting they don't have the technology.
They're scientists, Biff. They tell the truth. And then you've got the climbers themselves. You can't run an extension cord up the cable, obviously.
Why not? Why not just, attach the world's longest...
The cord would weigh more than the cable.
Oh.
Yeah. So the current best idea is laser power beaming. You shine very powerful lasers from the ground onto photovoltaic panels on the climber. The climber converts that light into electricity to drive its motors.
Okay, that's dope. So the whole thing is solar-powered just from really focused sunlight that we make ourselves on the ground.
Yeah. Plus, the climbers have to handle the friction of gripping the cable at hundreds of kilometers per hour, and life support for multi-day journeys.
Wait, multi-day? You don't, zip to the top in a few hours?
No. At reasonable climbing speeds, a passenger trip to geostationary orbit takes a few days. The early estimates were over a week. Modern designs aim for 2 to 3 days.
A few days of just climbing.
A few days of climbing, like an ocean voyage in 1920. You'd board, you'd settle in, you'd watch the Earth shrink through the window.
Whoa, that I did not know. That changes the whole feel of this thing for me. It's not a rocket, it's a canal or highway.
Right, with a constant flow of traffic. Enthusiasts envision multiple tethers, some for ascent, others for descent, with traffic balanced so as to reduce the lateral swings caused by the Coriolis force.
Far out. I'm seasick already. What else?
Now, on the engineering side, you also have to worry about micrometeorites, space debris, lightning at lower altitudes, even active sabotage. A 2017 analysis, Pearson and colleagues, estimated a tether in today's debris environment would face a 1 to 2% annual chance of being severed catastrophically.
1 to 2% per year? So in 50 years, your odds of still having a working elevator are worse than a coin flip.
Right. So the design requires active collision avoidance, possibly self-healing materials, and a serious cleanup of orbital debris before you can even start.
Cool. So the to-do list is invent unprecedented materials, invent unprecedented deployment, invent unprecedented climbers, and tidy up Earth orbit. Easy.
That's the list. Plus the small matter of $50 to $150 billion over 20 to 30 years of active construction.
Now here's the part I really want to push on, the economic case, because everyone says the elevator changes the game by dropping launch costs from thousands of dollars per kilo to tens of dollars per kilo. But meanwhile, the rocket guys are not standing still.
They are not.
SpaceX, Blue Origin, all the reusable rocket folks are driving costs down hard. By the time the elevator might be ready, 2080, 2100, rockets could be $100 a kilo, $500 worst case.
That's the killer counter-argument, Biff. The economic gap between rockets and the elevator narrows every year that rockets improve and the elevator doesn't get built. There's a real scenario where you spend $100 billion and 30 years on a structure, and by the time it opens, rockets are doing the same job for twice the price and a tenth of the political headache.
That is a heartbreaker. Like building the Concorde in 1970, only to watch the 747 take over the market because it was way cheaper per seat.
That is exactly the right analogy. Concorde was technically superior, twice the speed, and almost nobody could afford a ticket. It ran for almost 30 years, got retired without a successor, and the 747 won.
Whoa, is the space elevator the Concorde of the 22nd century? Spectacular, gorgeous, technically a marvel, economically a dud.
That is a real possibility. I think it's the strongest single argument against the project, but I do think you're slightly oversimplifying.
Oh, good.
defend the more exciting future?
Two things. First, even a 2-to-1 cost advantage at industrial scale is enormous. If you want to launch 1 million tons a year, which is what space-based solar power or orbital manufacturing would require, the gap between $50 a kilo and $300 a kilo is the difference between possible and impossible. It's a phase change, not a discount.
Okay.
Second, rockets have hard throughput limits. You can only launch so many in a day from so many pads before you're cooking the atmosphere with exhaust and shaking buildings off their foundations. The elevator runs continuously, 24/7, 365. Different category of infrastructure. Rockets are like FedEx jets making individual deliveries. An elevator is the continental rail network. It's the difference between moving an army and moving a civilization.
So if humans really want to industrialize space, like really want to, the elevator is the only thing that can do it.
That's the proponent argument. Bradley Edwards, Brian Lobsher, the people who've spent careers on this, they all say the same thing. Rockets are great for missions, elevators are required for civilizations.
Okay, I'll grant that that's a strong frame, but let me play the skeptic one more time. The single point of failure thing. You build one cable, one. If it gets severed by debris, by sabotage, by some hypersonic missile from somebody who's having a bad week, what then?
You lose everything. Trillions of dollars of investment, all the cargo, all the people on the cable. And if the break happens far out in space, you could have 10,000 kilometers of falling tether to worry about, or more. Parts of it burn up in the atmosphere, parts come down across the equator.
Wait. The cable is on the equator, so when it falls,
It wraps around the Earth.
a burning rope wrapping around the Earth, 2.5 times around the planet.
Well, only if the break happens near the far end of the cable.
Oh, right, which I guess would have to be terrorism, like in Kim Stanley Robinson, the Mars series, what I mentioned earlier. Rebels detach the elevator's counterweight, sending it flying off into space, and the cable falling to Earth. I mean, Mars.
That's the horror movie. Most threats will be much closer to the planet, though, in low Earth orbit or below, so most of the cable is likely to drift off into space.
Still, that means the cable basically requires its own permanent military. Navy on the surface, anti-missile systems, anti-satellite systems, cyber teams, the whole nine.
A whole defense regime. And here's the weird part. The cable is probably on a floating platform in international waters on the equator. Whose military is in charge? Is it a UN structure, a consortium, a private corporation? We have no precedent.
And if we're talking nations, then whichever one controls it has an instant military advantage over everyone else, which tells me either we have world peace and everyone shares it, or this is a hotly contested piece of real estate.
Well, the prediction considers a range of actors who could build it. We just have to hope for one of the better scenarios.
Okay, that just unlocked an entire science fiction novel in my head. Hold on, let me try to picture the everyday reality of this. So, I am, let's say, a middle-class kid in 2102. I save up some money, I buy a ticket on the elevator. What is my trip like?
Okay, you fly to the equator. Let's say the anchor is south of Hawaii, off the coast of Kiribati, or maybe off the coast of Ecuador.
Sure, as long as there's Starbucks. Go on.
You take a hovercraft out to the anchor platform, which is itself a floating city. Hotels, training facilities, a museum, probably, because by then this is the eighth wonder of the world. You sit through what is probably the most boring training session of all time.
Buckle up, don't take off your seatbelt. Here's how the bathroom works in zero gravity.
Pretty much. Then you board your climber, about the size of a small railway car, maybe 2 stories, 50 passengers, and then you start going up.
How fast?
200-300 kilometers an hour, slow by rocket standards, but you climb for days.
Days of looking out a window.
Well, I'm sure they'll have movies, but yes. You'd watch the Earth visibly curve below you within the first hour. The atmosphere thins into a glowing blue rim. By the second day, the whole planet fits in your view. Gravity gradually drops. By the time you reach geostationary orbit, you're weightless.
So it's not just a transportation experience, it's a transformative experience. People come back changed.
There's a name for this, the overview effect. It was coined by a writer, Frank White, in 1987, based on interviews with astronauts. They consistently report this feeling, when they look down at Earth from space, of seeing the planet as one fragile blue marble, no borders. Edgar Mitchell, who walked on the moon, called it an instant global consciousness. Right now, fewer than 700 people in history have ever had that experience.
700 in all of history.
After the elevator opens, 300,000 people a year, maybe more.
Oh, man. Imagine if you really could ship every world leader up there for a week, every CEO, every angry online commentator. Would we be a different species after a generation of that?
That's the dream of some elevator advocates. That cheap, regular access to space changes the human point of view.
I want to believe that.
Me too.
Okay, the cable itself goes through every altitude. Does stuff get built along it?
Almost certainly. Once you have a permanent structure spanning every altitude, from sea level to geostationary orbit, you start to get a vertical city. Observation decks, hotels, research labs, manufacturing facilities at different gravity levels.
Different gravity. Right.
At various altitudes, the apparent gravity is different. So you could have low-gravity labs at 10,000 kilometers, microgravity factories higher up, and at geostationary, you're effectively living in a giant space station that happens to have a permanent connection to Earth.
That's the bit that maybe most blows my mind, because right now, space station means 6 people in a tin can who can barely get fresh socks. With an elevator, supplies are continuous, mass is unlimited. We're talking real cities in orbit, not a Musk PowerPoint. Real cities.
Real cities, which is a precondition for real cities on the Moon and Mars, because you have to launch all that mass from somewhere.
Okay, I gotta come back to the article's deepest point. They end by basically asking, are we still the kind of civilization that can do this? Or do we, and I'm going to read what they write because it's killer, quote, do we remain a species of quarterly earnings and electoral cycles, achieving great things but not the greatest things?
The greatest things.
Works far beyond any person's passion project, like this podcast, which is just momentary vibrations in the air, far beyond any one life or even generation. Because look, medieval Europeans built cathedrals across 150 years. Chartres took 60 decades. Cologne Cathedral 600 years. The people who laid the foundations were dead before the towers were finished. They never saw it. They built it anyway. The Egyptians built pyramids. The Chinese built the Great Wall over almost 2,000 years. We don't really do that anymore.
We don't. Apollo was 8 years, the Manhattan Project 3, the International Space Station a decade. You and I made a similar point when discussing the first interstellar space probe a few weeks ago.
Oh yeah, geez. If I remember right, that probe would be the size of a postage stamp, but getting it to another star system would be a multi-generational feat.
Exactly. Size alone could make a space elevator a multi-decade construction project.
So a space elevator isn't just a technical challenge. It's a test of whether we can still be a cathedral-building species.
Yes, and I'd add this. The cathedral builders worked across multiple lifetimes because they believed in something larger than their own lives. A god, an afterlife, a community that would persist. The question for us is, do we believe in anything that big anymore? Big enough to spend a century working on?
That's an uncomfortable question.
It is.
I mean, there are some candidates. Climate, long-term survival of the species, maybe colonization of other worlds.
Those are real, but notice how easy it is to put them off. The cathedral builders had a more immediate motivation, the literal fear of damnation, the promise of paradise in heaven, in a realm at the limits of imagination. We have, the promise of microgravity manufacturing techniques? The promise of killer views from space hotels?
You could say we've been on a civilizational quest for killer hotel views since the invention of the elevator itself. So the article basically says by 2100 plus or minus 35 we'll know. Either we built it or we didn't. And either way, that tells us something deep about what we became.
Yes, and the answer might be we became something different. A civilization that does its great projects in software, in orbit, through AI. The cathedrals of the 22nd century may not look like cathedrals. They may look like a planetary brain, or 10,000 small satellites in formation. The elevator is one specific test of one specific kind of capability. We'll see if what we've built inspires the same kind of awe as the great wonders of the past.
Wow, that's a heavy thought to end on.
It is. Let me leave you with one piece of hope, though. The article mentions some wildcards. AI-driven materials discovery, for one. We may find an alternative to carbon nanotubes that hasn't been imagined yet. Graphene, discovered in 2004, is one candidate. Something stranger could emerge from machine learning applied to chemistry in the next 20 years.
Right, so the materials problem might just get solved by an AI sometime in 2031.
Could happen. There are AI systems already, like DeepMind's GNOME, that have predicted hundreds of thousands of stable new materials in a few months. We may be one such discovery away from the right molecule.
That's a real wild card, not science fiction.
Not science fiction. And there's also the staged approach. Build a lunar elevator first, because the moon's gravity is so weak the materials problem becomes trivial. Build a Mars elevator next. By the time you tackle Earth, you've got a generation of experience.
A lunar elevator. That actually feels plausible, like we could see that this century.
A lunar elevator could be built with Kevlar, basically, existing material. It's almost an engineering exercise. And once it's there, the cost of operating on the moon collapses.
And then you've got the wild cards on the other side. China, for instance. If China decides this is a national priority the way they decided high-speed rail was,
Manhattan Project scale commitment from a single nation could compress the timeline dramatically. Chinese material science is advancing very fast. The Chinese state can sustain multi-decade infrastructure efforts in a way few other governments can. They built 35,000 kilometers of high-speed rail in 15 years.
wait, hold on. 35,000?
35,000.
That's roughly the length of one space elevator's tether in rail, already built by one country.
What a coincidence, right?
Yeah, that reframes the whole "is this possible" question. Then there's climate change.
Right. Severe climate disruption could either kill the project by sucking up all available capital or accelerate it as part of a serious push toward a space-based civilization. There's an argument that space-based solar power, beaming clean energy down from orbit, becomes essential by mid-century. And that needs hundreds of thousands of tons in orbit, which needs the elevator.
It's funny how every big prediction we do on this show eventually runs into climate change.
It's the boundary condition for the rest of the century. Everything happens around it.
All right, so where does this leave us on this one?
I think it leaves us with a prediction that's less about engineering and more about us. The physics works, the materials are hard, but maybe not impossible. The economics depend on what else humanity does in the meantime, and the political will is the real question. Whether we can be patient, whether we can cooperate, whether we can think in terms of centuries.
Whether we still build cathedrals.
Whether we can share a steady, strong belief worthy of a cathedral.
Heavy. I love it. Okay, listeners, thanks for joining us on Friday Farsight. If you want the full prediction, with all the references, all the percentile breakdowns, all the wildcard analysis, head over to Strategic Farsight.
Until next Friday, Biff and Betty signing off.
Signing off from the Burj Khalifa.
Great view from up here, isn't it?
Yeah, too bad this is radio.